So it's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker tonight, Jerry Seaman, who is a great friend of the ACM and a real supporter of the kinds of values that underlie and that are exemplified in this event. We're really delighted to have him here to speak with you tonight about liberal education and off-campus study. I can really think of few people who are more thoughtful and perceptive than Jerry about what makes small liberal arts colleges such special places. He really understands the whole picture, the importance of excellent teaching and the intertwined relationship between learning and teaching, between teacher and learner. He knows the centrality of personal relationships at our campuses, the importance of civility and decency, and he exemplifies the fundamental ethos of liberal arts colleges in which living and learning are thoroughly integrated. And yeah, he really does get the importance of having a global perspective and connecting learning on campus to learning in the world. Your program notes give some of his biography, the fact that he became interim president of Ripon College in November of 2011, after serving as vice president and dean of the faculty at Ripon, a position to which he will return shortly in the fall. Is also a professor of romance and classical languages. What the program doesn't tell you is what his colleagues say about him. They talk about how his calm leadership has really made a difference at Ripon in this year of transition. They talk about how he has really engendered confidence for the whole institution as he has taken over the interim presidency. They talk about his steady influence at the head of the faculty, and the way he's been such a strong advocate for strong academic programs at Ripon. I've seen him work at ACM in a variety of venues. As I was talking about this afternoon, we have lots of different contacts with ACM faculty members. I've worked with Jerry with the Committee of Minority Concerns, with the Advisory Board of Deans, with a steering committee for a faculty career enhancement program, and through all of those, Jerry has always had a totally reasoned voice, even when he was yelling at me on occasion, but that was rare. His specialty is medieval French literature, got his master's and PhD at Stanford, his BA in French international relations and political science at the University of Madison. And he has continued to teach, even as he has done all of these administrative things, and has taught French and also, I think, a very popular seminar on Tolkien. The program notes also tell you a little bit about his junior year abroad. I like the lines there about how this was an ancient time before cell phones and computers, which I think Jerry would say was beneficial to the experience. And after that experience, he says he went and slept in a tent, grew a beard, and traveled all over Europe. And I think that probably is part of what will influence what he tells us about tonight. What the program doesn't tell you, my Ripon sources tell me, is that Jerry is also a member of the band Barbara Drive. And if you go to myspace.com and search for Barbara Drive, you'll get just a flavor of President Seaman's talents on the guitar. It's not going to make you forget about the boss, but I defy any of you to find a president on an ACM college who can play guitar like our speaker Jerry Seaman. I'm not aware of any president who has a band anything like Barbara Drive. And he might break out the guitar if you really ask him tonight, but I'm not sure he brought it. In any case, we're really grateful that President Seaman is able to take some time out of a very busy schedule to join us tonight. I think he had to cancel a gig at Madison Square Garden for this. His experience and his wisdom, his generosity, his openness to experience of all sorts, his understanding of what it really means to learn and to teach, make him the ideal person to help us focus our thoughts tonight as we celebrate the terrific work that all of you have done and explore some of the complexities of learning from our experiences and our self-discoveries around the world. Jerry, thanks for being here.
I'll try this. Okay. guitar at the end of this. So in September of 1984, I was lucky enough to wake up in Paris and celebrate my 20th birthday. It was the beginning of an incredible year for me, which I spent in the south of France studying political science in Aix-en-Provence. When I got back, the Dean of International Studies asked me to speak to the students about my experiences, and I never did. So tonight I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to talk to you about off-campus study and liberal education, but I'm also going to give you the speech that I never gave. And I'm going to do it in two voices. One voice you would expect coming out of me, sort of the serious and academic and humorless voice of a president. And, you know, the other voice, I will try to connect with the person I was when I was 20. I know you're 20. I know a bunch of you were probably 20 or were 20. So to help you do that, this is me when I was 20, on a boat, on the English Channel. I'm going to start in my academic voice. Students report a variety of effects of off-campus study. Three that all students seem to have in common are these. 1, developing a higher level of confidence and independence. 2, gaining a larger awareness of self. And 3, increasing their capacity to understand the world, their connection to it, and their place in it. So how do these effects reflect, match, or further the goals of liberal education? That's what I'm going to focus on mainly. Students also often say that they are forever changed by off-campus study. What does this mean, and how does it happen? These questions also interest me, and I hope will be of interest to you as we go along. So I'm going to talk about the goals of liberal education. A year ago, Dave Burrows from Lawrence, Larry Breitbort from Knox, and I gave a workshop on what we call the holistic goals of liberal education. In it, we identified these 9 goals: self-direction, analytical skill, ways of knowing, the capacity for understanding the world, problem-solving, creativity, powers of expression, world citizenship, and excitement about the world and human accomplishment. You will note that 3 of the 9 goals make some reference to the world: capacity for understanding the world, world citizenship, and excitement about the world and human accomplishment. These connect very neatly to students' self-reported development of their ability to understand the world, their connection to it, and their place in it. They connect also, but less explicitly, to gaining a larger awareness of self. Self-direction as a goal of liberal education obviously connects here too, and clearly mirrors the development of that higher level of confidence and independence reported by students. There are 5 other goals: analytical skill, ways of knowing, problem-solving, creativity, and powers of expression. I believe that these goals are also advanced in unique ways by off-campus study, and I further believe that you can find them interwoven in what students say about their confidence and independence, their sense of self, and their knowledge of the world. Freaking out looking at myself. 3 things: study, experience, and setting contribute to the academic, artistic, and personal development of our students when they are in off-campus programs. So I'm going to cast back 20 to when I was 20. So in my case, study was very important. I spent long hours in class and outside of class, taking notes, reading, and thinking. I needed to learn how French political scientists taught and thought. I needed to learn what problems were important to them, how they articulated problems, and how they formulated and expressed their solutions. I needed to perfect my language skills too. I needed to be able to write and speak French at a very high level in order to pass my exams, let alone follow in class. I will say that too, when my language skills became sufficiently developed, I was able to find a new outlet for personal expression. I began to dream in French. If you're a language student, and Tim is, you know that when this happens, it's a remarkable thing. I also wrote in my diary in French, and tried and largely failed at writing poetry. Succeeding in the classroom and in language learning gave me confidence, and to some extent inspired me to be creative. It helped me to learn things not just about political science, but about myself. I discovered I could do things I had not done before and felt more independent for it. I saw myself functioning in a place in the world that was previously unknown to me. I understood things about that place that I could never have understood by reading a book for a class back home, or in more current terms, by watching a video or experiencing it virtually through a computer. I believe then that the actual study in off-campus study connects to and causes, in its own part, those three effects students mention most: confidence and independence, awareness of self, and knowledge of the world. It advances for the 5 goals I mentioned too: analytical skill, ways of knowing, problem solving, and powers of expression. Focused and rigorous study, especially in an off-campus setting, owns all of these skills. You don't necessarily need to be studying a foreign language or even in a foreign country for that to happen. You just need to study. So John mentioned parts of my bio, and he mentioned that I did not have a television, a landline phone, or a computer. I want to also add that there were no ATM machines, and that students in those days could not even dream of getting a credit card. The only money you had was the money you brought, and you had to make it last. I don't say these things to boast about how hard things were. They weren't hard. There are probably more challenging off-campus experiences today. It was over 25 years ago, but I was in southern France, and that's a pretty easy and luxurious place to be. So I say this not to boast, but rather because these are important elements that shaped my experience. And experience is the second piece that contributes to student development during off-campus study. It is undeniable that the things that happen outside of the classroom are the things that are most different from anything a student has experienced before. These are the things, I guess, that affect us the most. After all, we've all been in classrooms before. Being in another place, in another country, and in another culture, that is new and challenging in ways that are unpredictable. And it is as hard as it is joyful. Even and especially little things, things that we might take for granted, can be hard. I'm going to try to enter my 20-year-old self. I remember that it was hard to go to the bank. It was the only way to get at my money, and the lines were always long. I never knew the exchange rate, and there was always some kind of form I needed to fill out. It was excruciating to go to the post office. I communicated with the U.S. almost exclusively by letter. The lines, if you could call them that, were absurd, and the hours made no sense. Who closes anything at noon, I would wonder? Don't they know that noon is when people take a break from work to go out and do things, like go to the post office? They seemed happy to close their window just when it was finally my turn. Old people, usually old women, never respected the lines. I hated it. The grocery store had nothing I wanted, and long lines too. For example, they had brains. Frozen TV dinner brains, right there in the grocer's freezer, with a picture of them, right on the box. Who eats those, I would wonder, completely disgusted. The laundromat was another adventure. The dryer only took 2 franc coins. There were no machines for making change. Finding a 2 franc coin was almost like finding a $2 bill. They existed theoretically, but no one had ever seen one. When on that rare occasion I got a 2 franc coin and change, I carefully stashed it for the laundry. I learned not to do much laundry. Eventually I learned a lot more than that. I figured out the bank and the post office, the grocery store, and the laundromat. I learned to take the time to flirt with my bank teller, who in turn loved to show off how rich I was to her colleagues, even though I wasn't rich at all. I let the old people take my place in line at the post office, and no one ever shut their window on me again. I spent the middle of the day doing what everyone else was doing, eating and being convivial. I found things I loved to eat, not brains, and went to the market and bought fresh food daily instead of going to the grocery store. People who know me know that I'm a strict vegetarian, but I will tell you that I had never eaten a salad before I was 20. I learned to frequent the same bakery and not to stop at just any old bakery that happened to be nearby. Doing this was like flirting with the bank teller, showing extra courtesy, and being convivial. I'll tell you another story from when I was 20. When I needed bread, I once flew in the door as the bakery was about to close, having run all the way from home. My baker had just told the last customer that there was no more bread. The other customer left, mad and disappointed. I knew not to leave. I knew that I needed most to pull myself together after running and arriving so late. After a moment, our eyes met, and without saying a word, my baker went in the back and got me some bread. It was warm and fresh. We both smiled, and the French never smile at strangers. That's true. So in the grand scheme of things, these are small things. For me, at the time, they were very big. They were big because they meant I was no longer a stranger, which means that I had become different from the person I had been when I left the United States. There are many reasons for this. One is that I stayed longer than many students can stay now. It's gone almost exactly 12 months. I learned the language very well. Another, and this goes back to the points in my bio, is that I was almost completely untethered from the people, places, and experiences I had known in the U.S. Yeah, I had friends. I interacted regularly with a bunch of other Americans on my program. But all of us were untethered in the same ways. Maybe the most significant way was financial. As I said earlier, the money I had was the money I had. I needed to be financially independent and financially literate. Another was personal. I think that I spoke with my parents twice the entire year. And once was when we found a payphone that was broken and let us make free calls. I don't think I ever spoke with my sisters, and I know that I never spoke with college friends that I had left behind. Still, another form of untethering was social and cultural. I've spoken of customs and behaviors above. We also had no access to U.S. media in almost any form. The internet didn't exist. I didn't have a television, and you simply didn't find newspapers and magazines from the States, or in English for that matter. The impact of U.S. imports was largely unfelt too. You could not find a McDonald's, a Starbucks, which didn't exist anyway, a Pizza Hut, or whatever. In those days, I wanted those things, especially in the beginning. Today, I don't. So here I am at 20 again. I knew when I returned home that, no longer a stranger in France, I had become almost like a stranger in the U.S. I knew this clearly when, after landing in O'Hare, my parents walked right past me without recognizing me. They were holding hands and actually split hands to go around me. This is a true story. You can imagine after being gone a year how warmly I felt welcome. I knew it too when we stopped at McDonald's on the way home at Lake Forest Oasis. I was so disoriented by the lights, by the noise, the colors, the smell, and the menu that I literally could not order anything at all. Everyday experience affected me deeply. I had to learn more than just how to function. I had to learn how to be. This meant solving problems that weren't academic. It meant analyzing people and situations, that is, real life, and making sense of them. It meant thinking creatively and critically about things I had never seen before, from perspectives I had never taken before, so that I could make sense of my surroundings and of my place in them. You don't want to miss that picture. It meant, I think I was more than confident and independent as a result. I was changed. I think that being untethered led to something more than understanding my connection to the world away from home, more than understanding world citizenship, and more than being excited and informed about the great things in the world. I no longer felt like a visitor. I think that's what it is. Untethering empowered me to think differently, more expansively, and more creatively. It opened up space for empathy and helped me move past the limits of admiring, condemning, or pitying others in other places. It focused my powers of expression and analysis. It led to more than self-direction. It led to leadership and assertiveness. In this sense, and in my experience, the untethering of off-campus study contributes to all of the goals of liberal education, across every dimension and at high levels of complexity. It is a key part of what makes off-campus study transformative. The final piece that contributes to one's development while studying off-campus is setting. So I'm going to talk about setting. I specifically will talk about travel so that I don't go over what I said about France. So I advise all of my students to study off-campus. After telling them about the academic and cultural benefits, I always say this: you will get dirty. You will get disheveled. You will get tired. You will sleep in tents, on trains, in cheap hotels, and maybe even in the street. You will smell bad. You will eat and drink things you don't normally eat and drink. You will see and do things that you will never get to see and do again. And you have to do this now, because you will never choose to do this again when you are older. This is something for people your age. Back to when I was 20. I had done all of these things when I was kicked awake by a not-so-friendly police officer for sleeping in the street in Rome. I had done all of these things when I was almost arrested in Yugoslavia, communist Yugoslavia, after losing my temper in a bar. I was very tired and just didn't care anymore. I was happy they let me go because I assured them I was on the next train out of the country. At Dachau, I experienced pain that is inexpressible. In Budapest, I saw rare things of beauty, experienced unusual kindness, and also witnessed the misery of many decades of oppression. I stepped on the beach of a tiny and glorious island that belonged to Yugoslavia and was almost unknown to tourists. The Vatican, Florence, the French Riviera, Barcelona, Paris, and London, all well-known and safe places. I visited them all, and they were all new to me, which made them fascinating and delightful. So what does travel have to do with liberal education? I think for me, it was the culmination of everything. It meant that I could wake up almost anywhere and on any given day, be inspired, feel empowered, and see things with new eyes, new things with new eyes. Along with study and my other experiences, travel shaped my intellect and character in ways that are irreversible. Off-campus study gave me, gave you, enduring memories, inspired lifelong interests, and prepared you for a life of learning. Like all of you, it made me confident and independent and helped me learn about the world and about myself. It changed me forever and made me who I am. It is why I do what I do. Thank you.
Responses?
How long did it take for your parents to recognize you?
I actually had to stop them, and they walked right by me, and I was like, hey. But physically, not long, but I do remember it was just such a strange thing to be in the house afterwards. A friend of mine, I think this is all, what they call culture shock. A friend of mine took about a year to sort of acclimate again. I spent some time trying to acclimate, mentally prepare myself to go home, and I felt like I was sort of mentally prepared, but I think I probably have never fully confronted it because I can't let go of it, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that when I came home from a year abroad, I took a taxi to my house from the airport,
Yeah.
and my whole family was gone. I left a note saying we were on vacation and they'd be back. Very small.
Okay, that's way worse.
You mentioned untethering yourself. Were you ever able to retether yourself, or is it possible to retether yourself?
I'm not sure you actually completely let go of who you've been, but you do change. And I think, my life has sort of been tethering myself to other things. My wife's from Chile. We spend a lot of time in Chile, and I speak more Spanish now than I speak French. But yeah, in a weird way, some of the things that people say about their connection to their country resonate oddly with me because I feel more connected to the world. Does that make sense?
That sort of experience seems so annoying. But do you feel like it's a much different experience as a man than it would be for a woman?
Totally, yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah, I mean, we traveled as 3 men,
Just
and
sleeping on the beach.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't feel personal insecurity. I mean, I slept on the street in Rome because I was tired. I didn't worry about it. I could see how it would be very different. And we were 3 men. We did get robbed once, but never injured.
You know what's happened to the other 2?
Oh yeah. Should I put the picture in?
What college did they run?
So that one, the blonde, is, he doesn't know I'm showing him this picture, right? That's my closest friend. His name's Matthew Harn. He's an artist. He was the dean of the Cleveland Institute of Art until just last year. He's got 4 pieces in the permanent collection of the Smithsonian. Quite a great artist. And that one's my friend Jordan Goldstein, and he's a lawyer in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Jerry, we were talking earlier today about the relative underrepresentation of men in study abroad. So I'm wondering if you might talk about why you decided to go and for a year. Well, I know that there was no single semester option, but why did you decide to go?
It's interesting. It's hard. I never really thought about that. I think probably, my older sister had been in Sri Lanka. She was in Sri Lanka for, I think, a semester or a summer. I can't remember. And so there was sort of this idea that, okay, she's done something now, what are you going to do? And actually all 3 of us did end up studying overseas. It just sort of happened, honestly. It did. It was hard to do, though. It was quite a rigorous process at Madison in those days. We had exams we had to pass and interviews we had to go through and tons of recommendations, and not everybody got through it. I mean, it was a huge school, so it was hard to pick for a program like that, but it was a very rigorous selection. So I obviously was committed to it at the time. And I think I knew I wanted to do it. I had gone very briefly to Quebec when I was in high school for one of these spring break trips, and that kind of flipped a switch. And my sister was in Sri Lanka, and I was like, I think I'm going to do this. So, not great reasons, but I was 20 at the time.
Jerry, going back to music, were you a musician before you went abroad?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is because when I went abroad, I spent a year in Spain as a student, and I didn't have much music there, and music had been my life. I'm a guitarist, a singer, and when I came back home, I was typical in the sense that I didn't want to leave Spain at all. I just wanted to stay and be Spanish. But when I got home, I picked up my acoustic guitar and started playing my music. I had this overwhelming sensation of being home and being peaceful. Did you experience anything like that?
Well, so I bought a guitar while I was there, and so I played guitar every single day and wrote music. Some of it it's all bad. I mean, it wasn't but I spent time doing that kind of thing on a daily basis, and some of the imagery in the songs was inspired by the stuff I would see every day. The songs weren't terribly good, but I still remember the images I used. So, so I was able to play while I was there. Yes, Mark?
I was wondering if you could say something about the connection between the intensive study and the untethering.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether the intensive study allowed you to untether in some ways because you had something else that you were connected to. And on the other hand, whether being untethered was a sort of a necessary precondition for that kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have
I
any
think it's
thoughts?
the latter. I mean, there are many different options, and the option I ended up being in was a really intensive one with in a really sort of high level French political science institute where I was the only American. And I was obviously way behind at the beginning because I didn't have the language skills I needed. And so I just really focused hard through reading and through listening and through. In those days, I don't know what it's like now, but the French took notes almost like they were, court reporters. They wrote down every single word that the professor said. And so that's what I did. And just doing that helped me learn a lot about the language, but also helped me learn about how they structure their presentations and their thinking about things. And I mean, that was just a really, really intense immersion that disconnected me from it. I mean, I knew how to be in a classroom, but the classroom was very, very different and intense in ways that I hadn't experienced.
I have two questions. First, how was the social life scene over there? Did you get to interact with the locals? Were you treated as like? And then the second question, how did it come to your mind to go travel so far away from South France to like Hungary? Like I would assume if I went abroad 10, 15 years ago, the farthest I would be like hoping to do is probably travel around France.
Yeah.
Like good facilities and things, and just like what you mentioned in your story.
Yeah. I don't know. I think, we did it because we could. We were young and healthy and secure because we were men. And, we just did it because we could. You had to do certain things. You had to plan well. You couldn't go into Budapest or Yugoslavia in those days. You couldn't just go in. So I remember we camped out, must have been a consulate or something, in Austria to get visas so that we could go on the train and go into Hungary.
Right, because it wasn't part of the European Union.
Right, no, it was part of the Soviet Union. And so we were riding on the train. It was a night train into Budapest. And there was another American who came into our compartment with us. So there were four of us speaking English. And, we eventually asked him, if he had a visa, and he said, no, you had to have a visa. And, this didn't turn out well at all. We stopped, the train stopped at the border. They came in with machine guns. They tore up our compartment, literally tore the seats out, they tore our bags apart. We had visas, he didn't, they just left them. That was a pretty challenging moment. I think we wanted to do that. It was just kind of one of these things of everybody's going to do this other stuff, so let's do something different. And so we did it.
Right. What about the social life? I'm asking
Socially? Yeah, I did have a lot of American friends, but I had a good number of international student friends and French friends too. I wasn't really very social outside of I was lucky I had an apartment, sort of like a little garden house that was connected to a family's house. So I lived with a family but independently. So they had 3 kids, so I spent a lot of time with them.